Welcome to my channel. This is Bruce the Boss, and breaking news as of late yesterday, January 24th, 2022. The Biden administration and the FDA have practically declared war on the American people during this pandemic by withholding monoclonal antibodies that have been very important and very useful during the fight in this pandemic, especially at least against the Delta and or Alpha Beta variants of the virus going around. By the way, please do not forget to subscribe to your channel. Your subscriptions go a long way with allowing me to produce more content. And let's spread the message and get this information out there. You need to be riled up. So what you're looking at right now is a letter from the Florida Surgeon General, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, if I'm pronouncing his name right. I digress. In any case, he's talking about the closure of several sites in Florida for monoclonal antibody treatments, which are already hard to get because the Biden administration limited and or stopped purchasing as much monoclonal antibodies as what's been needed during the course of this pandemic to help treat symptoms of those suffering from the Delta variant. Now, this read, and again, this was from late last night, Tallahassee, Florida, that this evening, without advance notice, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, aka the FDA, has provided their emergency use authorization for the following two monoclonal antibodies, also known as Eli Lilly, Regeneron. Unfortunately, as a result of this abrupt decision made by the federal government, all monoclonal antibodies state sites will be closed until further notice. Individuals with appointments have been directly contacted regarding cancellations. If you have tested positive, please contact your healthcare provider, yada, yada. Now, Florida disagrees with this decision that blocks access to any available treatment in the absence of clinical evidence. And this is a major case or charge being made that this decision was made in the absence of any clinical evidence. To date, such clinical evidence has not been provided by the FDA. Now, if you ask me, that basically means is they're declaring war, Big Pharma in particular, because in order to have an emergency use authorization for instance, the jabs, and to get that through, there has to be no other form of treatment, particularly therapeutic treatment, in order to treat said virus. And so, how do you justify an emergency use authorization for an experimental medication? I don't care how safe you proclaim it is and how safe it has been for the overwhelming majority of people who have taken it. It's still experimental. It has not gone through any clinical and or long-term trials or to see what long-term effects there have been, because they've barely been around for about 13 months as is, just available to the general public. But I digress. In order to even justify mandates, there has to be no other therapeutic treatment once you do get the virus. Well, you can't have that if you have such successful treatments such as monoclonal antibodies, in this case Regeneron and or Eli Lilly. And you see this, and they've been seeing the massive success that Florida has been having in terms of dealing with this, especially compared to states like California, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and or Michigan that have gone 180 the other direction in terms of how they've handled it when dealing with certain mandates and restrictions that states like Florida and Texas have just not done because they have these other useful therapeutics. How do you justify these mandates and roll forward and or push through jab or nothing? You get rid of the competition by stating or trying to proclaim there's no other substitute for the jab. Apparently now, again, the Surgeon General for the state of Florida, as well as Governor Ron DeSantis, have been definitely blasting this decision as soon as it came out. Again, as you can see, this rolled out late last night around 10:24 p.m., reported here on Channel 8 News there in Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis is demanding the Biden administration reverse its sudden and reckless decision to revoke the emergency use authorization for Regeneron and Eli Lilly monoclonal antibodies. The FDA said it was revoking its authorization for both drugs, which were purchased by the federal government and have been administered to millions of Americans. There's the FDA without any clinical evidence and or data, as claimed by the Surgeon General for Florida. In the absence of any evidence, they're claiming that it is not effective against future variants. Since when could they predict anything? In fact, last I recall, they've been slow to the ball and or late to decisions in their areas that most of us were already at. We already knew natural immunity was a thing. The CDC just jumped on board on natural immunity and its effectiveness. We already knew that the effectiveness of the jabs couldn't have been what they said. They said from the outset of this that if you get the jab, the virus stops with you. You couldn't get the virus. You couldn't transmit, let alone get sick and or pass it on to anyone else, but let alone you get sick from it, hospitalized or die. That proved to be false after a while because now there are already 3 jabs and Israel's already 4 jabs into it. Everything that they predicted has been wrong. They've been flip-flopping on everything. They've now just turned against cloth and or in many cases surgical masks in favor of the now N95 mask. As you can see here, they're already talking about millions of N95 masks being ordered. They've been wrong on so much. Why are they doing this? Again, they're saying it's not effective. My then response would be consistent across the board because we're already 3 jabs into it in many countries. Israel's already 4 jabs into it, and people are still getting it. Obviously, the jabs aren't that effective of stopping you from getting it, stopping you from spreading it. I did a video talking about how the CDC was hiding information over the course of the summer about how the viral load and the jabbed and unjabbed were exactly the same. So the effectiveness of the viral load is not doing it with the jabs. If you're going to be consistent and say it's not effective of stopping transmission or stopping viral load, then pull the Johnson & Johnson and Moderna vaccine from emergency use authorization. And for that matter, revoke the rushed and probably paid for Pfizer FDA approval that you did for the Pfizer biotech, because that's not stopping the spread of the virus at all. It's not stopping people from getting it. And last I recall, Colin Powell still died despite being fully jabbed. So let's see here. Going on, Omicron's resistance to the 2 leading monoclonal antibodies have upended the treatment's playbook for the virus in recent weeks. Now, they're claiming this is strictly for the Omicron because of the Omicron variant. My thing is, there's still another variant out there that still makes up a decent percentage of all cases, particularly hospitalization, something known as the Delta. By removing these very helpful monoclonal antibodies, they're making the case that it's specifically because of Omicron, as if there's no other variant currently out there in circulation, or it could be in the future. We know that this has been very helpful against the other variants, particularly Delta. We know that people like former President Donald Trump, Tim Pool, Joe Rogan have gotten the Delta variant, started coming down. Well, can't say Trump, but definitely Joe Rogan and Tim Pool came down with it, started getting some pretty moderate, almost severe symptoms. Once they took the monoclonal antibodies, they're better in like 13, 12 hours. So that's practically a death sentence for anyone with the Delta variant who gets it and are unable to be treated for it. And I wonder, could you hold the FDA and the Biden administration accountable for any adverse reactions to the Delta if you suffer from it and couldn't get it because they denied access? Now, the Omicron variant is another beast in and of itself because the Omicron, by its very nature, is a mild variant, whether you get jabbed or not. I remember 48 hours before Thanksgiving, I was out in the Atlanta, Georgia area visiting my family for the holidays, and it was spreading around social media that only 6% of the continent of Africa was jabbed, which says a lot for the second largest, second most populated continent in the world, over 1.2, 1.3 billion people, and only, 6% of that population jabbed? And no major catastrophes, no major issues, no major headlines of hospitals overflowing, people just getting sick, crazy numbers across the board, nada. And then I guess that was an inconvenient truth. And so magically, about 48 hours after that started spreading, news of the Omicron variant started popping up, a new variant in South Africa of all places, one of dozens of countries within the continent of Africa. It was their way of saying, look, they just spawned a new variant because they have not been jabbed, because the previous news was poking a hole in the importance of the jab mandates and the requirement to beat the pandemic when the continent of Africa was beating it without the jabs. But they tried to then blame Africa on this new variant. But this new variant, Omicron, by its very nature, is mild. because the former statement is still true. If only 6% of the continent is jabbed, obviously the other countries can't possibly have a high percentage in any number whatsoever of jab rates. So South Africa had to have a low jab rate. I checked it. The number of or percentage of their population jabbed was roughly about 23%, is roughly 23%. And still the doctors across the board in South Africa are making the claim that the jab is, the Omicron variant is by its very nature mild. Don't believe me? Take a listen.
More patients coming in with the same sort of symptoms. They all tested positive. I alerted the advisory committee of the minister on the vaccines because I'm part of that committee, and that's why it's easy for me to say to them, listen, something is wrong. I have seen today a picture that doesn't fit in with Delta. And then the beginning of this past week, it came out that this is the new variant going around. What we are seeing clinically in South Africa, and remember, I'm at the epicenter, that's where I'm practicing, is extremely mild. For us, that's mild cases. We haven't admitted anyone. I spoke to other colleagues of mine, the same picture.
You've heard it from the horse's mouth, and still making that claim. This is another story regarding the prohibition of monoclonal antibody treatments, particularly because of Florida's great success. I feel as though this is their way of really trying to attack Florida and make them look bad, and especially with the bad numbers that the Biden administration is seeing and the potential red wave coming up in the 2022 midterm elections. They're really trying to make a lot of these red states look extremely bad to limit the damage that they're expecting come November 2022. This is criminal, should be. But again, I digress. What you just heard was a video from a leading doctor, which represents a pretty good, and this is a consistent story across the board in South Africa, was that it was a mild virus to begin with. Again, 23% jab. That means another 77% of the population in the country of South Africa not jabbed, and still across the board, it's a mild variant by its nature, regardless of whether or not you get jabbed or not. So stop with the BS about how you got double jab, triple jab, still got the virus, but it would have been much worse if you didn't get the jab, because if you got the Omicron, that was going to be the case no matter what. And even despite that, you never know. You do not know. It really definitely depends on your age and your overall health, because the fact of the matter is the average age of hospitalization is already 66 years old. In order to get an average age of 66 hospitalization, the overwhelming majority of people do not look like me and or fit in my demographic in terms of age group. You're not getting a lot of 30-somethings. You're not getting any real 20-something-year-old. You're getting largely 50, 60, 70, 80-year-olds. More so probably 60 and 50-somethings in order to bring the number down, but we know a majority of the people are elderly. And then we also know as a fact that over 78% of the population hospitalizations are individuals who have, that 78% of all hospitalizations were individuals who were overweight and or obese. It's another thing that you have to look out for. So, why are they doing this? They're claiming the Omicron variant, which again, by its nature is mild. The Delta, again, it all depends on your age and health. 94% of all hospitalizations and or deaths from any of the past variants were individuals who were, again, over the age of 66 and had other pre-existing conditions that contributed to their death. I talked about this in numerous other videos. You can go check that out. So to say that this is over a mild variant is a death sentence for all of the other variants. This is a good article you can read as well, talking about the abrupt end made by the FDA. So they're saying that the FDA is trying to make it that people in Florida, that's a pretty harsh statement, but it's not, it's not far from it, because there's no other reason for denying. I'll put links to these articles in the description box below. Be sure to check that out. Let's see, last September, DeSantis slammed the Biden administration for even withholding antibody treatments in the state, telling Floridians that he'll fight come hell or high water to get those treatments to the residents. So we saw this coming even before, when there was sufficient evidence of its effectiveness. But this is really a fight that Big Pharma is picking in order to make the claim that there is no alternative to getting their jab, no alternative to helping them line up their pockets, as well as making these politicians who are heavily invested in the success of these jabs for their own portfolios and or profits, as well as for a power grab. I wouldn't put it past them to know that the Democratic Party is right now sinking in the polls, looking at a big red wave. The report just came out last week that there was the biggest political party shift in the history of that particular polling, a 9-point swing in favor of the Republicans for the upcoming midterm elections. They're getting desperate knowing that they're going to be uprooted out of power. So I think that this is a desperate attempt to not only make red states look bad, to mitigate some of the damage come midterm elections, but also an attempt to also justify massive mail-in voting. Because if you deny any therapeutic treatment for the virus, then you make justification as to why people who can stand in line for hours just to get tested suddenly can't stand in line for 30, 25 minutes, maybe an hour at most, depending on where you live and the traffic, to go and vote in person. I don't really get that logic, but they can try to make the justification of push mail-in voting, which we know is flawed by its only design, because it really makes it harder to really verify that information. And we've also proven in the 2020 election that you can get away with scanning in mail-in ballots without any real oversight into the legitimacy of those mail-ins, without any oversights as to whether or not are they even verifying the mail-ins, are they double counting them. There are a lot of forensic audits that are currently underway, which are not looking good. Mail-in ballots are fraught with error, and they're going to try to push that. There's a lot of hidden agendas going on, but this is big news right here. I'll keep putting a couple of these articles out there in terms of the stoppage of this, the fact that there is really no justification, no clinical data to support this decision, other than my estimation and or determination, and that is this is a war on the unjabbed in order to line up the pockets of big pharma and to force people into wanting to get jabbed as if there's no other alternative. Again, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video, please comment on this video, share the news, get outraged, make an impact, call your local representatives to get this change. This is Bruce the Boss, and I'm out. Peace.